Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai here. With the news that the ancient Magus Bride will be implementing AI translation for its English manga, the debate over localization has reached an all-time high. I'm sure you guys have probably already seen videos from either Hirohei or Rev Says Des on this, and my personal views fall in line with theirs. As delightful as it sounds, AI is currently not able to replace professional translators. At best, it is a tool that translators could use to help with the sheer volume of text on their plate. However, that entire AI script will still need direct human supervision to make sure words like saber aren't translated as the Sabar or Ichigo is strawberry. At least right now, AI is not the answer to our prayers, though it may be soon. For now, we still need a human, and the hard part about that is finding a human who won't butcher the script or taint it with their biased perspective. To that end, the core issue hasn't been solved. That said, the mere threat of AI has brought out some of the absolute worst takes defending bad localization. All of our favorite villains, such as Katrina, have popped out of the woodwork to expose themselves. On one end, you've got folks saying individual localizers don't have enough power to insert their agendas, that changes are the result of upper management interfering. On the other hand, we've got localizers openly bragging about the changes they've made, literally describing their job as a game of seeing what they can get away with. At the very least, it's shown how these fans aren't at all sympathizing with the thought of these people getting replaced by robots. An AI's mistake is just about on par with a deliberately sabotaged script. Our main subject today is, of course, Jamie Marchi, a voice actress / scriptwriter for Funimation, and by extension, Crunchyroll. For 6 years now, she's been associated with the most infamous example of bad localization out there, the pesky patriarchy of Dragon Maid. I was never really sure if she actually wrote that conversation, only that she antagonized all of her critics by claiming responsibility for every dub change that ticks off incels and anti-SJWs. Well, now that folks are talking about Dragon Maid again, Jamie's actually taken to Twitter to not only claim to have written the line, but also to defend it. Naturally, she's calling all of her criticism harassment, but at least she's taking the time to respond rather than mass blocking people. It's the most I've ever seen from one of these localizers, and it's worth going over all of her rotten takes. Before we do though, I want to quickly summarize a lot of the discourse I'm seeing going on about localization. This will be an abridged version of my video covering censorship apologist bingo. The main thing I hear all the time is that it's impossible to achieve a one-to-one translation in many cases. That's not some got-ya defense. We all acknowledge that already. However, just because something doesn't have a direct translation, that doesn't mean you can't at least strive to be as close as possible. Maybe something like a 1-to-2 translation. Instead, localizers bring this up to justify whatever changes they feel like, even if they're akin to like 1-to-100. This defense is often brought alongside the idea that, without their localization, the script would be dull or stilted. That's a scare tactic. There are dozens of ways to rewrite a sentence in English without losing any of its meaning. Nobody's complaining that a line is finessed a bit for lip flaps, or to better flow in English. It's when the actual meat of the line is altered unnecessarily that we bring it up. It doesn't take a genius to realize that words like yeet or mansplain weren't in the Japanese version. Sometimes, localizers will say it's their job to make the English equivalent of Japanese-specific references, but that should really only apply to language-based puns. It's been proven time and time again that it's bad to erase the Japanese culture from an anime or game. We don't need our rice balls to become jelly donuts. We don't need our tofu to become pizza. If an anime references some obscure Japanese right-wing politician, it's not a localizer's place to swap it with, say, Sarah Palin. The thing about references is that there's never any guarantee we'll get them. By nature of being an anime fan, I'm more likely to catch a reference to Doraemon than something from Dora the Explorer. I know the names of seiyuu more than I know the names of football stars or classic rock musicians. To that end, replacing references just makes them harder to understand for me. It caters to supposed normie sensibilities, rather than teaching us something new about Japanese culture. Lastly, a lot of localizers will hide under the umbrella that Japanese companies want them to spice things up, or to remove potentially offensive elements. Sadly, this is true. Japan doesn't always know what will sell the best overseas, and they put their faith in Western ambassadors to guide them. The problem there is that the very people guiding Japan are the same ones doing the localizing. In other words, the localizers make their changes, then convince the naive Japanese property holders that these changes are necessary. That's why it's important for us to skip the middlemen and let Japan know we want their stuff unfiltered. Unfortunately, Japanese businesses can be really backwards in their thinking, trusting their corporate affiliates over their actual fans. That's how people like Jamie continue to thrive in this industry. She and her ilk have established a clique that desperately tries to ward off any opposition. With that out of the way, let's actually look at some of these critiques and how Jamie responds to them. It's important to note that Jamie is not a translator, but rather an ADR scriptwriter. Officially, this is supposed to be someone who adjusts lines to match lip flaps and timing, but it's obvious they take much greater liberties than that. We've got ourselves the classic Dragon Maid scene. Toru and Lukoa are both ancient dragons that have started living among mortal men in Japan. The bulk of this show's humor comes from them adapting to human culture, trying to fit in with the rest of society. When Lukoa takes on a human form, she's got massive tracts of land that jiggle all over the place. Her typical wardrobe is a cleavage paradise, which is what prompts this particular exchange. The actual translation goes as follows. Toru, what's with that outfit? Lukoa, everyone was always saying something to me, so I tried toning down the exposure. How is it? Toru, you should try changing your body next. Basically, Lukoa's busty, exposed chest stands out, and the people she sees in public keep noticing or pointing it out. In response, she now wears an undershirt that covers her cleavage. Toru, however, jokes that the issue isn't her outfit, but rather her figure in general. There's definitely a sense of either pity or jealousy, and it's very common for anime gals to compare their chests, especially at hot springs. Toru's not necessarily trying to be mean. It's like a friendly jab at best. The original dub released by Funimation, however, tells a completely different story. Toru, what are you wearing that for? Lukoa, oh, those pesky patriarchal societal demands were getting on my nerves, so I changed clothes. Toru, give it a week, they'll be begging you to change back. The amount of assumptions in Lukoa's line are baffling. Getting on my nerves implies she's pissed off about the reaction she's been getting. Pesky patriarchal societal demands implies Lukoa has identified the source of people's attention as an oppressive force meant to subjugate women. These aren't things that Lukoa expresses in Japanese. At best, she recognizes people may be reacting to her exposed skin, so she covers up to see if that changes anything. As we'll see later, Jamie insists that even though the original line doesn't mention patriarchy, the context of their dialogue indicates that it's basically the same thing. In Jamie's mind, it's all political. The only reason anyone would think to stare at or notice a woman's cleavage is to objectify or oppress them. Even if you could prove that to be true, tracing every cultural stigma back to men's abuse of power, that's not necessarily how the character sees things. Thus, it is a clear example of Jamie injecting her worldview into the character. I imagine we could argue about this all day, but it's actually the third line that really constitutes a red flag. In Japanese, Toru specifically mentions Lukoa changing her own body. It's implied that Toru's jealous and/or condescending. In the dub, however, Toru is nothing but supportive. Give it a week, they'll be begging you to change back. Excuse me? What is that even supposed to mean? Does it mean that conservatives condemn women for exposing themselves, while at the same time enjoying that exposure? Whatever logic is going on here, it's something that Jamie completely hijacked the original line to try and insert. It's basically the equivalent of, "Yas, queen, you go girl," which is the exact opposite of how Toru is supposed to respond. In just these two lines, we can see a self-congratulatory narrative that represents Jamie's view of the world. It paints the two girls as sassy and defiant, more so because that's how Jamie wants them to be, rather than how they actually are. This is why when localizers say, "just learn Japanese," they're being disingenuous. Nothing about the translated version is incompatible with English as a language. In this case, a faithful adaptation is totally possible, yet we can't have it because Jamie is our middleman. Still, even when we do start preferring subtitles over dubs, we get criticized by those very same people. They're out to get you no matter what, unless you shut up and enjoy what the localizers provide. Jamie starts out saying she changed this dialogue in order to match lip flaps, and so the community took this as a challenge, providing an alternative localization with the same number of syllables while keeping the text accurate. I kept getting comments for showing too much skin, so I tried dressing more modestly. Any thoughts? In response to this, Jamie calls it stilted and argues it changes the context. If she thinks this changes the context, then she clearly doesn't understand the scene she just adapted. As far as it being stilted, just listen to how much of a mouthful pesky patriarchal societal demands is. It's a veritable tongue twister. From a purely linguistic standpoint, her line sounds far less like something an actual person would say. Still, to give her the benefit of the doubt, OP provides her with 3 more possibilities that all match the syllable count. Jamie's response is juvenile at best. The question isn't being answered. What question? The one Toru asks about Lukua's new outfit? You do realize it's possible to answer a question by beating around the bush. In fact, that's a very Japanese thing to do, and it's what Lukua does in this actual translation. This is like getting pissed that Lukua's response isn't written in active voice or something. Of course, Jamie doesn't really clarify herself. Instead, she condescendingly states, "There's so much more nuance I could get into, but you don't want to understand." Dude, OP is clearly trying to engage in genuine discourse about this, and I'd argue they've been putting much more effort into this discussion. She'd rather you trust her authority than have to actually explain herself. She outright states that she doesn't have to. Her 12 years in the industry should be proof enough, but that's the problem. She says, "You think Crunchy's going to put your line in there instead? Send them your lines then." You know damn well that's not how it works. Actually, this feels like a threat. It's like saying, whose side do you think Crunchyroll will take? Yours, that of an online troll, or mine, the one with industrial authority? It's creepy to hear this from a self-proclaimed feminist, as it sounds like the kind of thing Epstein would say to one of his victims. Contrary to what Jamie might think, we don't just criticize the individual writers, but also the companies that continue to hire those writers. We can't even trust Crunchyroll in this matter, since Jamie's employment is already proof of their stance. Anyway, after more pressure, Jamie finally elaborates on her process a bit more. She says not all syllables are equal, referencing diphthongs, when 2 vowels combine into a single syllable. I'd say this might be relevant if we were talking about song lyrics, but in this case, it's just dialogue. If you happen to watch enough anime in Japanese, you'll quickly learn that lip sync isn't their biggest priority. There's a world of difference between those corny old Speed Racer dubs.
You talk as if it's not your responsibility. No.
And turning the dialogue into a mathematical equation. As long as it's close enough, people really aren't going to care. That, and if I recall correctly, this exchange takes place from a single camera angle. When Toru gives her 3rd line, we don't even see her face, so there's actually more freedom to be accurate there. Jamie mentions that it doesn't make sense for Lukua to ask Toru a question that gets ignored, but that's a criticism for the original line. Lukua goes, "How is it?" to which Toru makes a comment about her body. That is a response to the question. People talk like this all the time, kinda like a wife asking her husband, "Does this outfit make me look fat?" And the guy responds, "You're beautiful, darling." It doesn't have to be a direct response to the question in its original syntax. Either way, this just shows how Jamie is willing to change the script so that it makes sense to her. In other words, I didn't understand it, so I erased it. Her misunderstanding of the original text bleeds through when fans debate her about Lukua's characterization. As Drew here says, Lukua's an airhead. She's naive and ignorant about human society, so her changing clothes is just an experiment to see how people react to her differently. It's not even malicious. Her goal isn't to stand up to the patriarchy, but rather blend in with everyone else. Jamie, on the other hand, insists Lukua must know about things like patriarchy because she's an Aztec god. In lore, Lukua is actually an ex-goddess, Quetzalcoatl, who does claim to be responsible for the birth of human civilization. However, that was back in the Aztec period, and it's abundantly clear that her sense of modesty doesn't match with that of modern society. She may be generally more aware of human culture than Toru, but at the same time, she seems oblivious about why thrusting her chest at her housemate Shota has him accusing her of being a demon or a succubus. To Jamie's credit, Lukoa definitely isn't against flaunting her body, but she's also unaware just how distracting it is to others. If that weren't the case, her scenes wouldn't be nearly as funny as they are. Again though, even if we were to concede that there's validity to Lukoa mentioning patriarchy, Toru's response in the dub is certainly out of character. The peak of Jamie's hubris comes when she defends patriarchy in the script by saying none of her words are in the original text. This is, again, an appeal to the idea that there is no proper translation, which is just untrue. Many Japanese words do have an English equivalent, so you just can't use this as an excuse to put in whatever words you want. Ohayo is going to reference the morning or waking up. Oyasumi is going to reference nighttime or going to bed. Jamie likes to refer to the idea of subtext, but that can just as easily be used to defend accurate translations. It's possible to speak a given line with such a tone as to give it a completely different meaning. Sarcasm is entirely based off this idea. A talented actor can read the line, "I love you," with an inflection that implies they want to break your neck. By that same logic, Jamie could have read the faithful dialogue with the attitude of patriarchy behind it. I'm not saying that's in Lukoa's character to do, but it does show how the nuance and flavor of a line relies just as much on its delivery than the literal words used. After Jamie's failed attempts at defending her Dragon Maid script, she began to blindly deflect criticism through petty insults. Turns out, she mischaracterizes her critics just as much as the characters she writes for. She likes to mock that her critics are just crying about it, while at the same time claiming to be harassed. We see this a lot, actually. While there are always going to be truly hateful, disrespectful trolls on the internet, they're often hoisted up to eclipse all of the genuine concerns being expressed by everyone else. All the things I've said in this video, and what others are saying on Twitter, those aren't attacks. Even if I were to say that you don't deserve your job, that would be a criticism about the quality of your work, rather than an appeal to you as a person. She's got a false perception of what's actually happening here, and what our concerns really are. Back in 2018, when asked to respond to Funimation's script changes at a panel, she immediately reframed the issue as unnecessary hate before the dude could even finish asking his question.
I'm ready to bring down the room. Let's do it.
We need a spotlight.
So Funimation has come under, let's call it, criticism for how they choose to adapt their scripts for
like
a couple
unnecessary
of shows.
hate. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Her response was that she has a vagina, deal with it, and that she has a team of talented, funny women she works with.
To the criticism, like, I have a vagina, deal with it. I am a funny woman. We are all talented, funny, powerful women. We are out here. It's going to happen. Deal with it. I'm sorry you're not getting laid. It's not about you. Move on.
Except nobody even mentioned her being a woman. It's completely irrelevant to this discussion. I guess you might expect a woman, or a feminist, to be behind changes like Dragon Maid, but that's not always the case. The issue is the change itself, and believe it or not, we fans truly do oppose inaccuracies from all sides. It's safe to say that pretty much everyone I've ever met agrees that it was wrong to straightwash Uranus and Neptune from Sailor Moon's original localization. It was wrong to hide and erase an obviously gay relationship, not because the world needs more gay representation or whatever, but because these girls were clearly lesbians in the original Japanese version. Back then, the people censoring anime were conservative Puritans who feared that Sailor Moon would make their kids gay. Changing scripts is just as wrong now as it was back then. It's just that the new perpetrators happen to be the far left this time instead. In either case, it's not a matter of political agenda. The fans will show discontent whenever the original Japanese is butchered. Jamie can't see that from within her echo chamber. Anyone who disagrees with her is instantly a bigot or an incel. She's got this victim complex that makes her think she's the one harassed most in all this, which she isn't. I know of several male localizers I despise as well, particularly Nick Maragos from Fire Emblem fame, who once said in a YouTube video that the West isn't trying to take away games like Senran Kagura, while at the same time tweeting to Xseed, telling them not to localize it at all. No, it's not that she's a woman. The reason Jamie is getting so much criticism is that she actively provoked the community. She literally used a picture of the evil queen from Snow White to declare that she would happily take credit for any localization changes that piss off anti-SJWs. Duh. Obviously she doesn't make all these changes, but she might as well given her toxic attitude. I want to wrap this up with her insistence that her critics are Nazis. There's something scathingly ironic about this take, one that should trash her credibility by her own standards. At the end of the day, all we're arguing about is whether or not localizers should have the right to alter our anime and games. Even though it parallels matters of free speech, it's ultimately a first-world problem. To insinuate anyone involved in this discourse is a Nazi just serves to water down the term and deprive it of meaning. That's not something we should take lightly. Recall when Gina Carano was cancelled from her role in The Mandalorian? The straw that broke that camel's back was her comparing the divide between Democrats and Republicans with the Holocaust. It was the left that cancelled her for daring to equate America's current political climate to a literal hellscape. To me, it was clear that she was just exaggerating, trying to get her point across. But if we're really going to play that game, then Jamie here is just as guilty. Not only is Jamie a complete hypocrite when it comes to her moral foundation, but more importantly, she's also incapable of separating these thoughts of hers from the work she puts out as a scriptwriter. She'll take aspects of our fictional entertainment and interpret them through her activist lens, her own political echo chamber. Ultimately, we do not want these people standing between us and our anime. What she and her colleagues do goes well beyond adjusting for lip flaps. We shouldn't have to learn Japanese to access an English adaptation that doesn't reinterpret anime through a Western viewpoint. Someday, I hope that any companies following this practice will learn that fans don't appreciate it. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all our anime lore, discussions, and Let's Play content.
you can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or a YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like spicy exclusive vids and early access.
As always, celebrate your fandom. I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters: Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Ormagoden, Freebrick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Link Pendrago, Olympian Doll, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Scout, Zamas Autonomous, Jared, Yukie Eros, Crow Kalem, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Major, Sogai CH, Caitlin P, Vladimirovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X 77, Hairsha of E-Rated Hands, Alistair Bernadotte, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.